There you go. Cool. All right, we're good to go. So I'll share my screen again, but thank you all for being here. First and foremost, I want you to know that this is something that Kathy and I have talked about for a long time since when she was a vice principal and I was hired at St. Catherine's. I've wanted to do parent learning sessions for a long time. My intention always is to get people in the same room together. I love to have in-person sessions, but we'll start here, and I'm grateful that you're here on Zoom. And hopefully throughout the year, we'll see how things go, but maybe we can bring things together in person. But, we'll start here on Zoom, and I'm grateful for you just being here. And all of the stuff that's covered tonight will be posted online as well. So that's the purpose behind recording this. And when I was reviewing what I had written, there's a lot to this topic. It's a very dense topic. Resiliency covers a lot of things. Let me admit someone new here. And so I also want you to know that the PowerPoint that I've created for tonight and the information, especially some of the topics and the resources that you can utilize as parents is going to be it's going to be posted on my school counseling resource page. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. I'm just grateful that you're here, and we'll go from there. So awesome. So if we get started here, trying to make it so I can see all of you and the presentation at the same time. Awesome. Cool. So I actually want to start with something that I start all of my classes with at school, simple mindfulness activity. And the reason I'm starting with this is because we start all of our classes by building resiliency through mindfulness. And mindfulness is...
What do you want then?
Candace, whoever is there, thank you for being here. If you could go on mute, that'd be awesome. Just glad you're here. So we start every class with mindfulness, and it's because there's some scientific data behind it that mindfulness connects certain parts of our brain that builds resiliency. And so I thought it'd be great for us, before we dive into this stuff that takes a bit of vulnerability as parents to show up and be present to, I thought it'd be great if we just take 1 minute just to do a little bit of mindfulness. So what I ask of you is that you sit up straight. And what I ask the kids, and I think this is good too, because I like to keep a connection to actually allow you to know what I'm teaching in class. Sometimes we don't get to connect a lot. And so I want you to know, because you're the primary educator of your kids, that you know what I'm talking about to them every single day. And so we start by talking about how you connect with your body by connecting with your chest or your stomach. And you just listen to the way you're breathing. You just start by listening to the pace of your breath in and out. And all that I ask is that you listen to my cadence. I'll walk you through this, and if it helps you to close your eyes, I invite you to do that. This mindfulness for just 1 minute in building resiliency is about being present, where we ask ourselves to the best of our ability to not think about the future where our worries lie, and not think about the past where we have regret or guilt, or perhaps even some shame that lies within us. So just let that go for a second and be here with us right now. And start by just recognizing your breath. And together, we're going to breathe in through our nose for 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going to hold it and then let it go for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on this next inhale, I invite you to close your eyes or look at the bridge of your nose so you're not distracted by the things around you. We breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1. And we breathe out for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm just going to do one more of those deep breaths together. Breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1. And we breathe out for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then in no rush, when you're comfortable, the next couple breaths, open your eyes, come back to the room. I invite you, if you haven't turned on your camera, I'd love to see your faces. I don't get to see many people nowadays in COVID, so I'd love to see your faces if you're here. I appreciate you being here. Hey, Jessica, good to see you. I see you at pickup every day, but hey, Scott. So like I said, this is being recorded for those parents who want to be here, but they can't. I've gotten a few requests, so I'm really grateful that you all are here. And what we just started with is something that's very simple. And I start with the kids in every single one of my classes with something that's simple like this to teach them that the benefit of mindfulness isn't just for me to have a calm classroom, right? It has something to do with them building resiliency in their own minds. It's connecting this prefrontal cortex that is right behind your forehead to the amygdala that lies within the middle of your brain. And your amygdala is where all the fear and the worry and the emotional energy of your brain lies. And the prefrontal cortex is what makes us human. It's where we have the ability to problem solve and think through complex situations. And so when you connect those, you give your body the ability to think outside of catastrophes and horrific situations, and you allow yourself to think cognitively and calm yourself down. And so that's the power behind mindfulness. And that's why I wanted us to start that tonight. And also just to show you that there's a connection between what I do in class and what I want to talk to you all about tonight. And on that same note, setting the stage for tonight, one of the things that helps our kids flourish is by allowing them to be good enough. You know, like perfectionism in a school that's as great as St. Catherine's, I see a lot of this idea of, you know, we're not validated for anything but the best, you know, and our kids are capable of a lot of stuff. We just got our MAP scores back. And I got to say, like, our kids are doing a great job. They're doing incredible things. But if we don't give them the ability to just be good enough sometimes, then we actually invalidate them, not on purpose, not by our doing, but we invalidate them in certain ways. So I just want to remind you that as parents, you can be good enough too. So in situations like this, you're showing up and you're saying, hey, I just want to learn certain things about being a parent. You know, especially for me, I'm not a parent yet. I'm just a school counselor. So I'm just trying to be the best school counselor I can be. I just want you to be the best parent that you can be in this situation. And by that, I mean, commit to just holding as much as you can and letting go of other things. You know, I don't think we'll get to everything in my presentation today. I think we'll get to, you know, probably the validation aspect to it. But that being said, just try to hold what you can and let go of what you can't, or that's good enough and that's perfect for me. So don't be afraid of falling short. You know, this is a vulnerable topic, allowing our kids to be resilient. It's hard sometimes if we feel like our kids aren't resilient, they're not bouncing back from things. We feel like we're like failures as a parent, but that's not the case. So just make sure that you're showing up and you're giving what you can, but you're not afraid of falling short, because we all do at certain points, and our kids aren't going to be perfectly resilient. But through this, we're teaching them to be resilient. We're teaching them that we can fail, we can mess up, and we can fall short. That's ultimately how we become resilient. So you got to start with a basic concept, right? And I want you to know too that I'm going to have hopefully some interaction throughout this, but a little bit of it is just going to be kind of setting the stage. And the first few things I'm going to do are just setting the stage. We got to start with the basic concept of what resiliency is. And I like to say it's our ability to handle and adapt to hardship. And the reason I say this is it's not just our ability to get ourselves back up off the mat when we fall down, but it's our ability to handle it. And I say that specifically because our kids developmentally don't always know how to get up off the mat. You know, like we often think of it as like a boxing metaphor. You know, like if your kid is in the ring and you get knocked down, you think just get back up off the mat. And this is certainly true. This is resilience, but it's not adequately adapting to the developmental stage of where our kids might be at, especially for all of you parents who might be tuning in for the kiddos who are in pre-K through 3. And I see the Stenders, I said this to the Wong family as well. A lot of this might be repetitive for the first two. Hi, Mary. And so, where's that Helen? I can't even tell. Your kiddos look this look so similar, but this might be similar. So if you want Stenders, I think the first and the second half hour might be similar in the first part of this. So just a heads up for y'all. But yeah, so we have to take in context of, you know, developmental stages, right? Telling a kid to get up off the mat is teaching them to be resilient, but if they don't know how to get up, then it's pointless, right? And so we have to start by accepting them where they are. And I get a lot of questions like, how do we teach them perspective? You know, like how do we teach them of how to have the perspective that I have, or that an adult should have, or like a perspective that will help them understand the greater context of what's going on in the world. And I know that's tempting to fix, but that's developmentally not where the kids are. So it's not going to make a big difference in the long run. So I like to think of it as, you know, I don't love spicy food. So the first time I tried like a ghost pepper, for instance, I would eat it and I'd be like, this is the hottest thing I've ever eaten. But since I tried stuff like that, I've had more hot food. I've tried spicier things in my life. I've adapted to it. And we have to teach our kids that that's okay to be at a point where the fight you had with your friends is the worst fight you've ever had in your life. And teaching them that in the greater context, it's not a big deal, makes sense to us, but it doesn't help or make sense to them necessarily. And so we eventually learn. And so what I'm trying to say is that accepting that our perspective is not their perspective is the first stage to resiliency building, right? We can't force our perspective onto them, even if we think it's going to help, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't really help, right? Because they are where they are and they're going to be there regardless of what they tell them or what we force on them. So if you say, hey, eventually you're going to have friends and you're going to realize like the values that you have are lining up with your friends' values, and you're going to meet the people who you're going to be with for a lifelong adventure. And that doesn't matter. At the moment, they're saying, oh, this is the worst fight of my life. How do I get through this? And the most important thing to do is sit with them and say, it is really big, isn't it? Because eventually they'll understand to wager those perspectives and figure out what's horrific, what's normal, what's catastrophic, what is tolerable. So I think as parents, like, we got to focus on just a couple of things. To build resiliency, we can think of it as emotional self-regulation. And I think that's more manageable because resiliency is a big term. It's a big word. We all want our kids and our students to be resilient and bounce back from everything we throw them. But it starts with emotional self-regulation. And so it comes from a couple things. Number one, and first and foremost, is from you all and from us as teachers, but mostly, first and foremost, the people they love the most, which is you all. And they look to you on how to handle and appropriately respond to hardship. So that's first and foremost what we've talked about. And that's where appropriate validation is going to come from. And we'll talk about what appropriate validation looks like, but it's going to come from you all in the model that you set. And this is also where I don't want you to like get sucked into thinking like, oh, I'm not the best at that. Just showing up every day and being loving is a great place to start. All right. But just know that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to have a PhD in parenting to know that just showing up is the best place to start. And then secondly, we have to let our kids survive and overcome surmountable obstacles. So where are kids coming from? We call this attachment theory. And you might have heard about attachment theory, but essentially they learn the best and the most stuff from people like you who they love the most. They learn how to respond, intake emotional messages, and learn emotional skills. And it becomes hardwired in their brain like a feedback loop. So they learn how to respond to hardship. They learn how to respond to difficult situations from people like you who they love the most. And they learn that, without self-regulation, they can't tolerate bad things. And going back really quickly to my definition up at the top of this page for what is resiliency, I don't like it just being stated as getting back up off the mat or picking yourself up when you fall down, because that's not all of it. Sometimes as kids, you just have to tolerate being down for a little bit, right? Because you don't know how to get back up. Sometimes you just have to tolerate being sad for a little bit. Sometimes you just have to tolerate being angry or frustrated for a little bit. And so if we don't teach our kids self-regulation, then they can't tolerate those experiences and they're going to bypass them. And they're going to learn how to rely on other people to get out of tough situations instead of relying on themselves to get through tough situations. So self-regulation is where it starts. So the role of the parents within the resiliency term, I'm not trying to tell you how to be parents right here. I wouldn't dare do that. But in terms of resiliency, it's to coach rather than rescue. It's encourage growth rather than save from the discomfort of life. And it's to accept your kids as they are instead of who you want them to be. And that goes back to that perspective piece. Remember, like, not trying to give them the perspective you think they should have, but accepting them for the perspective that they currently have. So just seeing that, this is the first interactive piece, but I want you to try to tell me in your own words, like, what do you think about this? Like, if you think it's true, if you think it's not true, if you think you have more perspective or different perspective than this, like, what do you think of that role as a parent to become or to teach your kids how to be resilient? You can put it in the chat box or just unmute yourself and talk. But what do you think of this? Like, that role as a parent to raise resilient kids.
I've just got a question, Kevin. That sort of goes along with this, but in terms of self-regulation, it's something that we talk about a little bit in our house, but I always find that like saying emotional self-regulation or self-regulation is not really at the level of a second or fourth grader. And so do you have any ideas for language to use to describe self-regulation
Yes.
for little guys? I
You
have two
know,
boys, so boys or
yeah.
girls.
Yeah, Mark, I would actually just bypass that language completely and just talk about emotional vocabulary. Just say, this is, give them the tools to succeed when they need to express themselves. Just give them the words they need to use. And so this is actually the next step we're going to take with validation, like what it looks like to appropriately validate people. I don't think you need to teach them the cornerstone, like step by step, what it means to have emotional intelligence. That has so much to do with interpersonal relationships and regulating yourself within conflicts and situations that are kind of uncomfortable. I think you could just go, Mark, straight to, giving them tools to find the right words to express themselves when they're frustrated. Starting with emotional vocabulary is a huge place to start. And then, as I'm going to kind of chat about next, just validation will be a great cornerstone, because Eli's only in third grade, right? No, he's in second grade. Yeah, he's so young. Eli's only in second grade. And so learning that emotional vocabulary is going to be a great cornerstone to where he needs to start. I don't think you need to necessarily talk to him about the ins and outs of emotional intelligence quite yet. I think if he just knows how to express himself accurately, it's going to be a great place to start. So with resiliency, yeah, thanks for asking. So I like to bring up this quote, we can't think of your kid as a package of seeds that comes without a label. Your job is to provide the right environment and to pull the weeds, AKA give them certain skills to use, but you can't decide who they're going to become. And we have to take our hands off the flowers and let them grow in order to grow resiliency. Sometimes it stinks when you realize it's not growing in the right place, or it's not the flower you wanted, but it's the flower that God intended to be in the world. So overall, we have to pull the weeds and give them skills to succeed, but they're going to be who they are going to be, right? I want to dive in on what you can do as a parent. I want to make this simple because there's a lot of stuff we can do to build resiliency, and it gets overwhelming. And I also want to preface this by saying I know that time is short, and I think next parent session I'm going to make it so all grade levels, we're just going to be together for an hour. But for now, we're going to make the most of what time we have. And so I want you to think about three things that you can do to build resiliency. And the first is appropriate validation, right? We have misinterpretations about what validation is. I think a lot of people think validation is just giving kids a bypass to do whatever they want, but that's not exactly what validation is. Validation is very purposeful, and it takes some skill to get used to. And so the second thing is teaching skills, right? Our kids don't have the skills to learn proper perspective, to sit with discomfort, right? We call it like tolerance, essentially, in a DBT kind of standpoint. In therapeutic settings, we call it distress tolerance. Tolerating distress is a huge skill of resiliency. And so teaching them the skills to distress tolerance is really important. And then the third point that I'm sure we'll not get to tonight, but is in the slideshow, is building strong character, because character lasts, but situations change. And so what you can do is not try to fix every situation, but work on character, right? And so I think that matters a great deal when we're thinking about things. And this is another takeaway that I want you to think about, because it's something I think we can wrap our heads around. In every situation, mostly conflicts, I want you to think about how you can allow your kid to feel like they have at least 51% of the win, and that'll build resiliency, right? Like if you feel like they did it themselves, even by like 1%, like you got them to that point, but then they take the step that solves the conflict, or that they solve the problem, or that they got through a difficult situation, then that's huge. And that's really all that matters. And that's what's important. So think about if you can allow your kids to have at least that point, because if you take 51% of the credit, then you're going to be the one they rely on to get problem solved. And that's not building resiliency, that's building dependency. And that's certainly not what we want. So you don't have to be the perfect parent, you just have to be a good parent. 51% of the win goes to your kids, and you're going to build a lot of resiliency. All right, so diving into validation, the power of it. Where we're giving our children the skills to trust themselves, right? The last thing we want to do is give our kids, we don't want to tell our kids, look to the world to tell you how to feel, right? We don't want to say, hey, look to your friends to tell you how to feel, or look to your teachers to tell you how to feel, right? You want to give your kids the opportunity to look to their inner selves to say, am I okay? Am I not okay? And trust that, instead of say, shoot, I got to rely on that person to my left or that person to my right or that authority figure in my life to say, shoot, what am I feeling? What am I doing? How do I handle this situation, right? And this comes up a lot when we think about, how many times as a kid did you hear the phrase, oh, you're okay, or like brush it off, or like pick yourself up, like dust the dirt off, like we heard those phrases a lot, and they're well intended, and they don't always cause trauma or hardship, right? But they are invalidating in a certain sense, because they take the ability of the child, they take the ability away from them of like listening to their inner self and saying, am I actually okay? Right? Am I actually okay? Or do I have to sit with some hardship for a little bit? Do I have to be uncomfortable for a little bit? All right, so quick things to consider. And this is hard when we're frustrated and it feels like our kids aren't being valid, but validation is not condoning bad choices, right? It's not giving into defiant behavior. It's defining the feelings that come with it, that come behind it. All right. So just remember that you're not giving into bad behavior if you're validating. Your goal here is to validate the emotion that they're expressing. And so the best gift that you can give them is to be present, to be empathetic, and to be loving, and to act loving, even if they're not acting loving necessarily towards you in the moment, because this is the first stage, and building character comes later. But first and foremost, to build resilient kids, we have to meet kids where they are and treat them, as if what they're saying to you is true. Their feelings are a true expression of what they're feeling, right? We have to rely on them to give us the truth, right? And if we take that away from them, they're not going to believe in their inner self. They're going to believe in you to tell them what they should feel. And so they're going to go out into the real world and they're going to say, mom and dad, or like look to other people and say, how do I feel? And this is where a lot of problems occur. This is where a lot of anxiety occurs, because you look to the world and you say, oh, shoot, how should I feel in this situation? What am I going to do? I'm nervous. I'm anxious. Always looking to have the perfect expression for certain situations. But that's not how we want to raise our kids. We want them to be resilient because they can rely on themselves to feel how they feel, and then tolerate, even if they feel bad, tolerate those bad feelings. It's okay to feel bad. They just have to get through it. So validation, remember, it's to confirm and trust the inner self. So that's what we're going for. And there, right here, I don't think I'm going to sit, looking at the time especially, I think I'm going to just focus on a few of these levels, but I thought it'd be helpful to think about levels and layers of validation to help us realize how deep we can go and learn more skills. And I would encourage you, once I put this up on my website tomorrow, which is just the school counseling tab in the St. Catherine's website. It's very easy to get to. Check this out for yourself and look back on it. But I think I'm going to focus on a few levels that I think are important. And I only go through this because I want you to realize that there are so many different ways to validate. And sometimes we mistake validation for invalidation, or we get impatient and frustrated with life and we accidentally validate. And the more you do it and think about it and reflect on how you validate, the better you're going to get at it. So the more we go through levels, the more validating it gets. So validation level number 1 is like the most basic level of validation. Level 6 is the deepest, most authentic. But level 1, if that's all you can give, if you're cranky, if you had a bad day at work, level 1 is the perfect place to be. Like, don't try to leave level 1 if that's where you can be. If you had a bad day, just sit with level 1. And level 1 is simply being there, being aware, putting your phone down by your side, putting it on silent, observing and listening. It's like simple therapeutic stuff that me as a therapist, the basic stuff that you learn on day 1, right? Like nodding along with your kids, saying, yeah, I hear you, like looking at them, having an open body posture, giving them the respect of listening just by being there. And that's validation level 1. And it often goes overlooked because people think it's not worthy, but kids really recognize when they're being listened to. And so level 1, if that's all you can give, That's huge. Like level one validation is a beautiful thing. And oftentimes that's all we can give, because we're tired and kids can talk a lot if they have a big day or if they have a lot of things to share with you. So if all you can give is level one validation, that's fantastic. Level two is accurate reflection. And you can sound like a parrot sometimes, like, oh, I felt sad today. Oh, you felt sad. Oh, I'm so frustrated. Oh, you're frustrated. But I'll tell you, and so Mark, and so I know for Melanie and Natalie, like Natalie's young enough to do this too, and Eli's young enough to do this. And I see a lot of parents, like Bodhi's young enough to do this too. That accurate reflection, it goes a long ways. Like kids respond to that. They say, "Oh, you're listening to me. Like you heard me say I'm sad. Wow." And so accurate reflection, you sound like a parrot, but if that's all you can give accurate reflection. The third is putting yourself in their position. The fourth is validating on history. For example, oh, I know like Sarah gave you a lot of trouble last year. I know that's been a hard relationship for you. You must be feeling really frustrated. You've been going through that a lot. I hear you. Right. And you'll notice through all of this, you're not trying to fix anything. You're simply validating their emotion. You're not trying to fix behavior at this point. You're simply validating. And believe it or not, this is what builds resiliency. We're not trying to build behavior differences right now. We're not trying to change behavior. You're simply trying to be there for them so that they can rely on their inner self and trust that what they're going through is real and valid. The next is validate based on current circumstances. And the last one I want to focus on is focus on treating the person as an equal. Now, I know that your kids are not equal in a lot of ways, right? Intelligence, wisdom, skills. Our kids need a lot of that stuff. But in the moments of validation, what they need is for you to be like, hey, that's normal. I'm with you. Like, I get that. I've been there before. Like when I was your age, yeah, I felt frustrated when my friends ditched me too. I felt really sad when I didn't get tagged as quickly as I thought I would. Or, it was really hard for me to let go of that toy that I brought because, my grandma gave it to me and it means a lot to me. So treating them as an equal, accepting them for where they are, that's the highest level of validation. And that's the most you can give them. And that's ultimately, if you're in the best place, if you're feeling like you have the energy to give that, that's where we want to be. But I would invite you to go back and look at some of these if you have the time, you have the space, and you can kind of dig into them deeper. I'm going to admit one more person here and see if we can just keep going. Hey, Cortez family, how are you?
Hi, good.
Hey.
Right now, the girls are at hockey, so Matt's on duty with that.
That's awesome. I love that they play hockey. I can't believe we're a hockey town now. I love that. Hey, so I'm just going to keep going. I think if everyone else is okay with this, since I think a lot of the people who want to attend ask for recordings, I'm just going to keep rolling so we don't have to be stressed for time. Is that okay with everyone? If I just kind of keep rolling? Awesome. That way we can have more interaction as well down the road. I appreciate y'all listening. So another thing I do for class is I bring tools like this, and I especially do this in my class, in my office space. But Mark, this gets to what you were asking, which is really good questions. Like, what do we do for emotional intelligence? And I like to give kids tools to state how they feel for a few reasons. Number one is it activates the prefrontal cortex, which is scientifically proven to activate their thought processes and take away just the activity in their amygdala, right? And so they're taking away activity from that emotional core that your brain is hardwired to feel and is helping you calm yourself down. And the simple reason is because you have to think about something. You don't spend as much time feeling your emotional state, and you spend more time using your thought processes and using your cognitive part of your brain. And so we take energy away from our emotional brain and we bring it towards our logical brain, right? You can think of it as two spectrums, right? You want to take energy away from your kiddos, like emotional center, and even it out towards their logical center. So you end up in the middle. So where they can feel what they feel, but also think logically. So they're not carried away by their emotion, but they're not thinking just on logic, right? They still feel what they feel, but they're not carried away by either. And so when you identify their emotion, you give them this power. And kids sometimes don't have this ability, like the Stender family, for example. Well, Colin's a smart cookie. I bet she could use this power wheel just fine. But a lot of kiddos, like in kindergarten and pre-K, would really, really love the 8 basic emotions on the right. They love pictures. They love things that are easily understood. Faces to identify how I feel, what I'm seeing, and so they identify that. And I shouldn't say that this is just for little kids. Sometimes adults like that too. You like to see something and say, this is how I feel, and identify it, because it gives you power over how you feel, and that's the ultimate validation. The one on the left, the feelings wheel, is my ultimate favorite because it's got the most words and it's kind of easy to follow. You start in the core at the 6. Let me omit someone else here, at the 6 core emotions, and then you go outward from there. And so, awesome. I love that more people are joining us here. And so you start from there and you ask your kids, identify how you feel. Go even deeper. Like, I see that you started with the sadness column. Like, is it just sadness or is there something underneath? Like, keep going out. Keep going out. Are you disappointed? Why are you disappointed? Are you displeased by something? And you don't have to fix it, but you just have to state how they feel and help them to identify it. So this is cool for 2 reasons. Number one is you're not telling them what they feel. They get to point to and say how they feel, which is validating for their inner self to get them to trust what's going on the inside and not rely on other people to say how they feel, but rely on themselves to trust how they feel. And number 2, you get to sit with them and validate that in the meantime, right? You get to say, oh, that's cool. Nice job identifying that. I see that. Like, I've been there before, And then you can go backwards if you want, and you can work with that feelings wheel by essentially all the layers, and it gives you a tool as a parent to not have to create certain things or not have to poke and prod. You can say, thanks for being there. Like, I can see you pointed to, the fear column, like, I've been there before. And I know from past history that those kind of math tests have scared you because they're surprising and they're stressful and math isn't your strong suit, and I can tell that, other people have this problem too. So you're not alone in this, right? You're not alone in this. And so by doing something as simple as that, you've hit on all levels of validation, and you've done so with the simple help of a feelings wheel and a basic emotions chart. And another thing I like about this is that we change our vocab with emotional intelligence and emotional IQ, essentially, that you're not saying to your kiddo that there are certain things as positive and negative emotions or feelings, right? When we say that there are negative emotions, you're kind of in a backwards way invalidating them. And I know that sounds kind of intense and kind of ridiculous, but if you say that, oh, those are such negative emotions, it's going to be harder to feel them in certain senses, Oh, like that whole blue and red column, those are negative. You don't want to have those. Those are bad emotions, But if we strive to say those are challenging emotions, then you teach your kid how to sit with them. You teach your kid, no, like, this is the human experience. This is where you are. This is worthy of sitting with. This is worthy of being here and sticking with them. And so you're validating even further by saying, cool, I hear you. You're feeling insecure. You're feeling nervous. Thanks for sharing that with me. And as a parent, I think that's a relief because you don't have to fix anything, right? You don't have to solve a problem. You don't have to fix a behavior. You don't have to teach a character trait. You simply listen and you restate. In level 2, like I said, you kind of feel like a parrot, but you restate and you validate what they're feeling in that moment. So I don't like to touch on this, but I will, just for the sake of, saying that invalidation happens because we're human. And sometimes, we have our best interests in mind and we have a long day and we invalidate, not on purpose, but because it happens. We invalidate because sometimes it's easy. Sometimes we feel like no, we don't have time to listen to our kids, or we're frustrated with our kids, or we're frustrated with our own selves. So we don't feel like we can take on the problems and the frustrations of our kids. So just to state kind of, there are some challenges, and encourage you to try to not shame yourself if you accidentally invalidate your kid, but just be aware of the things that happens when you invalidate. The biggest, first and foremost, is number one, and you have, you kind of have some confusion with self for the kids. So back to the example of when I had spicy food, right? Like if I tried ghost pepper and I tried, I'm like, this is the hottest thing I've ever had. And you come up to me and you're like, no, it's not. No, it's not. There are way spicier foods than that. I'd say like, what? No way. No. I'd start to think, what? No, like that's not true. Is the ghost pepper not even hot? You know what? Am I crazy? And that's a stupid example, I know. But if you come up, to a little one, like say Natalie, for example, comes up to you. And I know Natalie doesn't often get in fights, but say she comes up to you and she says, hey, I just had the biggest fight of my life at kindergarten, or like you can say the same thing about Bodhi, actually. Say they got in a fight together, in kindergarten or first grade, and I just got in the biggest fight of my life. Instead of saying, no, you didn't, that'll pass. What they say is, oh, is that not a big deal? Should I not trust that that was a hardship? Should I not trust that that's something I need to try to get past? Am I actually okay when I feel like I'm not okay? And oftentimes when our kids come home or something, or I do this too sometimes when I'm not having a good day, and kids come in for recess and they say, what's going on? I say, oh no, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. But what if they're not okay? You start to invalidate, and that breaks down their resiliency because they stopped relying on their inner selves to deal with that hardship. And they start to rely on you to say that, oh, I need Mr. Ward to tell me I'm not okay. I'm not okay until Mr. Ward tells me I'm okay, right? I'm not building a resilient kid there. I'm building a dependence child, and that's not what we want. We want them to rely on their inner selves to deal with hardship. You're not going to fix or take away challenging emotions. You're not going to, like if your kid is sitting in the fear, anger, sadness quadrant of this feeling circle, it's not quadrants, I guess. It's a section of the circle. But if you're sitting there, you're not going to take that away. You're not going to fix it or make the world a perfect place. What you're going to say to them is, you shouldn't feel that way, and you're going to confuse them. You're going to confuse their inner self. So a big part of validation and building resiliency is allowing your kid to sit in that space and not say I'm okay, but say, I'm not going to invalidate this emotion. Even if it doesn't make sense to me and my perspective is wider than yours, I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm going to let you build resiliency and understand that, hey, like this is really hard for you in this moment. I hear you. That's it. So then they start to rely on their inner self. Because if we take that away from them, then they try to always be perfect in every way. This builds perfectionism. And I think actually, number 3 says oversimplification. This can lead to the idea that I always have to be perfect because Mr. Ward says everything's okay, And so if I don't feel okay, I still have to try to be okay. Even if I don't feel okay, I have to try to be okay because Mr. Ward says it's okay. And that's challenging for kids if they don't actually feel okay. What we'd rather is for them to be able to accept and witness when they're feeling anger, fear, sadness, worry, distress, and sit with it. So they can say, hey, I'm not okay right now, but I'm going to use the tools I need to use in order to get okay in the future. And that's what ultimately builds resiliency. So when we invalidate, sometimes we cause confusion to the inner self. Sometimes we cause problems with emotional regulation. We don't teach kids to sit with hardship. We teach them that you can go to someone else to take it away or tell you how to feel. And sometimes we tell them to look to other places to get validation. And that doesn't help in the long run. So I want to take a pause. You all have been great. I've been talking way too much, but I want to ask if you all have examples of, either times when you validated and you feel like, this is a worthy validation, just a phrase you've used with your kids or a phrase you think of right now, or a time when, or just a random example. It doesn't have to be a personal experience, but an invalidation that you've heard before that you might want to reframe or flip into something that's validating. So I'm going to open the floor here if you want to dive in, either a validating response or an invalidating, whatever it may be. You can also, sometimes I don't like to speak up, so you can also send a chat if you want, because that works great too. Oh, Jessica, I just see your text too, so thank you for that, for the chat box.
I'll speak since you brought it up.
Yeah, thanks, Ivy.
So I feel like I used to invalidate all the time just because I didn't want my kids to feel bad. And then I read How to Talk So Your Little Kids Will Listen, and it was all about acknowledging feelings, a lot about what you're talking about. And I realized, like, obviously they're people that are going to have emotions, and I need to like accept that, and they're not going to be happy all the time. So I don't know what the point is, but I just invalidated it all the time until recently because I wanted them to be happy. So anytime something happened, I'd be like, it's okay, like you'll be fine. And now I realize they're people, and I can acknowledge that they're not happy, and life will go on. So that's all. This is a good piggyback on that.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jessica. Thank you. I know Lainey is such a sweet girl too. Sometimes for the quieter kids, you know, we take for granted that they're experiencing big feelings too. I know that. I appreciate your feedback, because Lainey can be such a quiet, sweethearted kiddo in class, you know, but some quiet kids need that kind of opportunity just to be listened to and validated. So I appreciate you saying that. Also, just for being open and vulnerable with your parenting skills, because props to you for trying to just learn new things and get better. That's awesome. Yeah, go for it, Ivy.
So I wanted to kind of piggyback off of Jessica as well. I think one thing that I've been realizing more recently is that I have to work with my own feelings of how I parent and my own anxiety and dealing with that in order to help my own kids with where they're at and to be there for them. And so a lot of what I'm trying to do, work with myself to keep myself not let my fears and anxieties kind of run where trying to help them too much or something like that.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Ivy. That's pretty awesome. And thankfully, Xavier and Kiara are happy kiddos. So, you know, you can tell even if we mess up and invalidate sometimes, our kids will still figure it out. But it's really cool that you're accepting where you're at and trying to examine that as well and be reflective. I appreciate you sharing. I think too what Jessica and Ivy were saying too, and I'll get to this at the very end, but recognize and remember always it's far more important that who you are as a parent trumps what you know about parenting, right? Like who you are is always going to be the most important thing. Like how you carry yourself, especially in times of distress, is going to trump the knowledge that you have. Like you don't have to have a PhD in parenting or a master's in education to figure out, all this kind of all the ins and outs, like it's more important how you carry yourself and what you express to your kids, or more so how you let your kids express themselves. That's going to carry the weight. So Ivy and Jessica, that really hit the nail on the head. That was pretty good. Does anybody else want to throw out an example of validation, what it sounds like, what it might not sound like, or an example that you're unsure about?
I might have a question. So we had recently a situation where we were planning something, and because of the circumstances that are outside of our control, so there was a possibility that would not have happened. And of course the girls were upset, but I was asking them, okay, it's still too early to draw the conclusions, but instead of being sad, look at the brighter side. Like, how can we turn this situation into something different and still have good experience? So in your opinion, is that then invalidation, or should there be like a step in between saying like, yeah, I understand why you're upset. I would be upset too, because I know you've been waiting for this to happen, but let's look at the brighter side. Because kind of my point was, you know, if you allow yourself to sit and only think about like, oh my God, that's not happening, I'm so upset, it's kind of like you will fall into depression, if you may say. But
Sure.
trying to again see something better, or try to make better situation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's hard with little ones too, because we can see down the road, we look in the future and we think like worst case scenario, you know, like, oh gosh, you're falling into the traps of depression or hopelessness, you know? I get that. That's so true. But no, I think the important takeaway is that validation has to come first and foremost. And then how you deal with that sadness also will be the greatest indicator of how your kids respond to that sadness. And so if you sit there with them in that sadness and then you show them how you respond to it by either pointing to different distractions or different things, say, hey, I'm going to play a game now because I'm kind of sad. I'm going to play a game, or I'm kind of sad. I'm going to go, you know, drive to get, you know, Dick's Burgers or something, you know, and you take yourself to that situation, then your modeling will be what is the best for them in that moment. But the validation has to come first. And I get where you don't want them to sit with that sadness. I completely understand that. And then that's where I think what we're getting to later with the skill building comes in handy. And that comes true. But I think parents and teachers, I should say, and school counselors, for myself, want to fix things really fast. So I'd say don't rush to the next step. Allow the kids to be sad for however you think they need to be sad for. And then, you know, and I would take cues from yourself, you know, like if you're still bummed about it, share with them and sit in that sadness. But then when you feel yourself kind of ruminating and getting anxious and getting frustrated with your sadness, then help your kids come out of it with you. Like, because your modeling is going to be the most important step. So I would say help them mirror what you're going through and give them the skills to do so, if that makes sense. It's like validate when they need to be validated, and then help them get out of it with the skills that you would use to get out of it. Because I get it. We don't want our kids to ruminate and to become depressed over something that we find is insignificant, but they don't always have the skills. So they're going to be looking to you first and foremost, right? It goes back to attachment theory. It's pretty basic. They don't know what to do. So they're going to look at you to understand how to go through emotional experiences. They're hardwired for it, right? It's that feedback loop where they say, what do I do when I'm sad? What do I do when I'm angry? And they're just going to look at you. So I would trust yourself, and then make sure you're in the right place to get yourself out of sadness and out of rumination when you need to, and go find a healthy distraction when you feel it's appropriate, and then communicate through that too. So like, I'm going to get up and go get a milkshake from Dick's because I'm kind of sad and I need to distract myself, and tell them explicitly why you're doing what you're doing. Or else they might just think, oh, she's kind of ignoring what I'm feeling right now. You know, like, oh, she doesn't even care about this opportunity that was taken away from me. Or she doesn't think that's important. Why should I think it's important? You know, say, no, I'm really sad. And I feel like I'm sad, but I also feel like I need to move forward in life. So this is how we're going to do it. Does that kind of make sense?
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, Kevin, I just have
Yeah,
another thing to piggyback on that, which is, as a parent, I think it's hard to be patient sometimes in those situations. But sometimes I find when I am patient, it is actually amazing what my children are able to do once they have gotten to a calmer place, that they might be able to work through that feeling much more easily, or they are able to come up perhaps with their own solution of how they're going to handle the problem that was facing them. And so as a parent, I sometimes have to remind myself to give them some space to do that. But that's a challenging part of being the parent, and just wanting it to kind of be like, you know, we should be over this now, or something like that.
Right. No, Ivy, that's awesome. I appreciate that, because you're modeling what it takes, right? And I think in a funny way too, I've seen that through Kiara because she's talked to me about, like using music and using cooking. I mean, and she probably saw that from you, like just when you're patient and you turn to other things, it ends up working out. They learn from your modeling, which is pretty significant. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's really cool. Awesome. So like I said, I don't think we're going to get to all of this, but this will all be up on the website. And so we're going to turn to skill number 2. And this skill, I would say, especially applies to the little ones. So Jessica, you could use this for your kiddos, but you can apply it to a lot more of life. It can be adapted for everyday use, and it's called a pride skill. And I like acronyms because they're easy to remember. And so pride is essentially putting validation into action. And it's a skill that you can teach your kids and you can use on your own. So the P stands for praise, simply sitting with your kid and praising what they're doing. Wow, like you made a huge Lego tower. That's really impressive, right? The R stands for reflect. All you're doing is simple stage 1, level 2 validation, right? Oh, school really sucked, didn't it? Oh man, your friends made you really mad, didn't they? Oh shoot, your teacher's really getting on your bad side. Even if you don't believe in what their behavior is, you're validating their feelings and you're reflecting that. Number 3 is imitate. Goes a long way. Even if you think what they're doing is childish, that's okay. Sometimes you show them that what they're doing, they're building confidence in what they're doing. You're imitating them. Say, hey, that's pretty cool. Can you show me how you did that? I don't know how to build a Lego tower like that. Can you show me how? Number 3 is describe. Describe literally what they're doing. Oh, you drew that dragon in red. Red's a really cool color. I see that you made that red and green and purple. Oh my gosh, that's a colorful dragon, Just validate what they're doing because they're taking in all these emotional messages and saying, oh, wow, they're paying attention to me. They're validating what I'm doing. Oh, I can mess up. I can be wrong. I don't have to do things the right way. I can feel bad. I can feel happy. And my parents are going to be there no matter what. So that description phase is a huge part of it. And then enthusiasm, right? Our body language plays a huge role in this. And I know that's hard for a lot of us because, including myself, trust me, we're tempted to look on our phones and check the score of the Gonzaga basketball game in the background. So our body language goes a long way. Give them your energy, give them your listening enthusiasm and focus. So that's the pride skill. And I put a link at the bottom of this to look more into it because I would love for y'all to look into this and share it with people if they find it helpful. The biggest resource I'm going to give you is this PowerPoint, right? It's not necessarily a presentation, but there are resources connected to this PowerPoint that feel welcome to go back and look into. So the next one, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but it's especially for the older kids. So I'm thinking of for the Stenders, Mary and stuff like that. I know Mary's probably not the one to push back a whole lot, but families are families, and that's what happens. So the 1-minute rebuke gives you a chance to express displeasure in what the child behaves like and not tell them that they're a shameful person, right? And that's a huge difference because resiliency is disrupted by shame. And when we build resiliency, we need to be focused on adapting behaviors and giving them skills. We need to stray away from the human desire to invalidate. And I know that sounds kind of rough, right? Like the human desire to invalidate. You don't want to do that with a kid, but we accidentally fall into that circle all the time. We invalidate people because we don't approve of their behavior, right? And so this 1-minute rebuke, I invite you to go back and look at it. It's a way to express if you don't like something in a gentle way without humiliating or shaming your child, right? And a lot of it has to do with just intentionality, right? Giving your kid your full focus, giving them a pat on the shoulder, trusting in them, letting them know that you're there by your side. And some skills to take further. Number 1, mindfulness, like we did at the beginning of this presentation. I do this at the beginning of every single class I teach your children. Mindfulness connects your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex, and your prefrontal cortex allows you to think more logically and less emotionally. And if we're dwelling in the emotional state of our brain, we're going to be completely overwhelmed and drowning, and we're not going to be able to be resilient. But resilient kids and resilient humans bring in the logical side of our brain. And so mindfulness says, hey, wake up logic, wake up critical thinking, and says, hey, bring that in and mesh it with your emotional side of the brain to make something that comes out to what we call a wise mind, right? Which is emotionality and logic combined to make something that is more resilient, right? And so being mindful is something that helps. You know, I do this thing called the Advent Mindful Calendar, and I do it more so for the kiddos just to have the experience of in class just being like, oh, mindfulness is pretty adaptable. I don't necessarily expect them. I don't assign it as homework. That's not my role. But my point is to say, like, mindfulness is really, really easily accessible, right? Sometimes just invite your kid to sit under the Christmas tree looking up at the lights without any distractions for a whole like 5 minutes, right? Or listen to a Christmas song without anything else to do but just listening for 5 minutes. Giving them a chance to connect with their prefrontal cortex and know what it's like to be present in the moment. And so mindfulness is thrown around a lot. It's a hot topic, but it goes a long way in building resilient kids. The next one is thought exercises, right? So checking your thoughts, and this actually does help with perspective, but it helps your kid do it on their own. It doesn't have you in the role of saying, hey, this is my perspective, this is what you should know. It allows your kid to say, whoa, hold up, wait, there are more facts to the situation? Whoa, like I'm not the only one who is struggling, or I'm not the only one who is getting in trouble. It allows them to think through that process and think logically and get to that conclusion. I know a lot of kids who use a calming mantra walking through the day. You know, I'm strong, I am peace, I'm stronger than my worries, I got this. Obviously, that helps with resiliency and sitting through displeasure, not fixing the displeasure, not taking away the distress, but sitting through the distress, saying, man, this math test is really making me anxious, but I know I can't leave, so what am I going to do in this moment? You say stuff like, I'm stronger than my worries. It's okay to mess up. I'm not going to be any less loved if I get an F on this math test. You know, like mantras that sit with you and walk with you through life are very, very valuable. And then, you know, that goes hand in hand with self-talk. It can go hand in hand. To calm the body, our bodies tell us a whole heck of a lot about where we're anxious, where we're nervous. So teaching your kid how to be really present to how their body feels. You can go through that stuff on your own if you'd like. Controlled breathing, 5 senses grounding, muscle relaxation. Those are links as well, so you can go back and look at those on your own time if you'd like. And remember, with all this stuff, it's scientifically proven that you're taking the energy away from that emotional side of your brain, the amygdala, and you're meshing it with the logical side of your brain to make a wise mind where our kids can actually adapt and learn how to be resilient and sit with discomfort, right? You're not taking it away from them. You're learning and teaching them how to sit with discomfort to make them more resilient. So I'm going to have to cut us off there. I told you I want to get to number 3, and I was right. So I invite you all. I am going to post this all on the school counseling page of the St. Catherine's website, as well as this recording. So you can go back and look at it as much as you want or as little as you want, whatever you need to do. But I want to leave you as this. Remember, like I said, it's far more important to focus on who you are as a parent rather than what you know. What you know comes secondary. Who you are and how you present yourself to your child is first and foremost what's important, because attachment theory tells us that they're going to learn from you how to deal with emotional regulation, right? They're not going to learn from a textbook. They're not going to learn from you stating things that you read in a book. They're going to learn from how you deal with hardship, right? You had a hard day at work and you come home all stressed out and angry. How do you deal with it? Or, you know, your other 3 kids are angry and you got to deal with the one that had a bad day at school. You know, how do you deal with that chaos, right? Take a deep breath. You show them how to deal with the high emotional stated kind of moments in your life. And if you worrying parents cause worrying kids who are overwhelmed by the world. And so I know that last phrase is a little bit intense, and I don't intend it to be that way, but if we overprotect our kids from some of those failures, we kind of enslave them in our own fears. And so what I mean by that is just allow your kids to fail, allow your kids to mess up, because you know that you're still going to be there to validate them and how they feel, right? And that's first and foremost what we care about in building resilient kids, because you can't change every single situation in their lives, but you can try to give them the skills to develop a strong character and a strong, resilient attitude. So that's what's important. I've got a lot more resources here. Go ahead and peruse those if you want, whenever you want. But, you know, more than anything, I just appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate y'all being attentive and sharing some of your experiences with me. And hopefully we can do this in person in the future, but you know, Zoom was a good stepping stone. So yeah, I love the St. C's community, and I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you. Also, always reach out. I'm available if you need me.
Thank you. This is
Thanks a lot,
wonderful.
Kevin.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Night-
too.
night.